Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me for another online yoga practice. So today's practice is going to be a very conscious practice in hip opening. There's not going to be too much strength based or movement in our practice today. Instead, we're going to be looking to explore the full range of motion through the hip. So it's going to be intense. We're going to be looking to push those comfort zones. And some of you, if you've got very open hips, you may not find it that challenging, but these are postures that I found have developed my hip opening practice a lot, but they are quite intense. So really, as always, adjust when you need to, modify when you need to, and please listen to your body. If you're working with specific postures and it doesn't quite resonate with you or you don't quite understand how it's supposed to feel, leave me a comment and I'm really happy to chat with you about modifications that may work around your body. That being said, please take it slowly, please take it gently. You may want a couple of blocks for today's practice, and I really hope you enjoy. Okay guys, welcome. So you may find it useful to have a couple of blocks for today's practice. If you don't have them, don't worry too much. Bring in either a couple of books or some pillows or something may even be really helpful to you today. Just having something there to support you may be really beneficial to your practice as we're working with some more active deep hip openers. So we'll start today in a bound angle position. So just hug your knees in towards the chest and then bring the soles of the feet together. So you want those heels to draw in as close to the sit bones as you can, unless you have any knee discomfort, and then you can bring them a little bit further away. And you can just tent your fingers behind your hips. If you struggle to maintain a tall spine here, you can always sit up on your block, and this will help to elevate those hips to create a bit more support where you can find that movement. So we're still warming up through the hips. So I invite you to take a little bit of movement here. You can take the hands to the ankles or to the feet, and you can just start gently pulsing the knees up and down. Depending on the mobility of your hips, your knees may be way up here or pretty close to the floor. My hips are pretty tight, so it takes a bit more extra work to work into the adductor muscles and find that stretch. And then just hold still. And you're welcome to stay here, really focus on lengthening the spine, or on your exhalation you can begin to fold forwards, bringing your chin or your forehead down towards the space in front of your feet. Try to avoid rounding the spine, bringing your head towards your toes, and instead bring your chest forwards. Keep pressing through the outside edges of the feet, so the pinky toe side of the feet push into each other, almost like you're opening up like a book. And then when you're ready, just gently coming up to an upright position through the spine, cross at the shins and try to bring it so that one shin is directly in front of the other. So almost like you're trying to bring both shins towards parallel with the front of the mat. One is just slightly in front of the other. From here, you can tent your fingers wide or bring them forwards. And then as we exhale, we fold. Now, this shouldn't cause any discomfort through the knees. If it does, just come into a standard cross legs position. And if it feels good, you're welcome to bring a bit of side to side movement into it. Remember, we're still warming up here. And when you're ready, walking your hands back up, switch so the opposite leg or the opposite shin is in front. And really you want to be creating almost like a triangle in between your thighs. So your shins are one in front of the other. From here, you can come up with a tall spine, or as you exhale, you can fold. Again, hands can be forwards or slightly wide, and you can bring yourself into some side-to-side motion as we begin to familiarize ourselves with stretching through the glutes. You may feel this on the outside of the hips. And then when you're ready, just gently walking your hands up, coming to an upright position through the spine. And then we're going to come into our child's pose. So we're just going to roll over the shins, come onto hands and knees. And then bring the toes to touch. Knees could be mat distance apart or a little bit wider as you bring the hips towards the heels, releasing the forehead down. Again, this is just a gentle stretch through those inner thighs. Also an opportunity to find a little bit of motion through the muscles in the chest and the shoulders. Not our focus for today's practice, but it can be nice to include some movement here. And then when you're ready, we're just going to bring ourselves forward and press our hips up and back to downward facing dog. Now, this is not going to be a flow class. We're not going to do too much
dynamic movement here, too much heat building. Instead, we're going to be focusing more on the direct opening of the hips, so more targeted stretches. However, it can feel nice to just open up those hamstrings here. If the heels touch the floor, you can just gently pedal those down one at a time. And really enjoy these warm-ups because we're going to be moving the hips into some quite intense variations. So really notice how this feels specifically through the backs of the legs, the hamstrings and the calves. And then as we inhale, lift the right leg up and back. You have the option to stay here or bend the right knee, bring the right heel towards the left glute. We're just going to hold here for a couple breaths, stretching out the front of the thigh. Inhale, extend your right leg long. And then as you exhale, step the right foot through to the space between the hands, drop that left knee down. So we're going to come into a low lunge. First option is to keep the hands on either side of the right foot, but if you want to move deeper into the hip flexors, I'm going to recommend that you come up, engage, strongly squeeze your left glute, your left butt cheek, so you can feel a further release in the hip flexors of the left leg. If you notice discomfort through your lower back, just draw your navel in and up and come slightly higher up, even if it means that this takes pressure out of the hip as well. Over time, we'll be able to sink those hips low without causing pressure through the lower back. Now we're going to hold here for a few breaths. I recommend that if you have a wall nearby, this can be a really useful tool for your practice. And what you're going to do is you're going to modify it so that you come to the wall, bring your left shin up the wall so the left toes face up towards the ceiling, and then bring yourself back to the low lunge against the wall. Make sure that that back knee has some padding or support, maybe a pillow. And straight away you're going to feel this, my goodness. This can also be done if you don't have a wall nearby, just by taking the left hand towards the left foot and just continue to let those hips sink low. Take another breath in. As we exhale, we're going to bring ourselves forwards. So if you're by the wall, just ensure that you can bring that left knee away from the wall first, so we're not doing anything too funky with the knee. And then we're going to come into our half splits. So we're going to straighten the right leg, right toes can point, or you can flex those right toes back. Hands can come to the earth or to blocks, or if you have a block handy, you may want to place it next to your left heel so your right sit bone can root down, and then you can bring your chin towards your right shin. Let the shoulders be soft so we're not pulling ourselves down. Instead, over time, we're feeling this release running through the back of the leg. Just check that your right toes are flexed back so you can work the pressure deeper into the calf and the Achilles tendon of the foot. So we're going to hold here for a few more breaths. If anybody has quite a good range of motion through flexion and extension of the hip, forwards and backward motion of the hip, you're welcome to try full splits. And we're going to take a modification or variation of full splits. So if you wanted to take it, come with me. We're going to come to our low lunge position, but we're going to have our hands to blocks on either side of the right leg. Okay, these are really important here. You want to feel supported as you transition into full splits. So we have a couple of options. You can either walk the left leg back or slowly slide that right leg forwards, and sometimes it's a combination of both. But you want to ensure that your hands are to the side of the hips and that you feel supported, that you're not just kind of collapsing all your weight into the hips. Over time, eventually, maybe you can slide that leg forwards even more, bring your hands down to a slightly lower setting on the block, or if there's space, you can place the block underneath the right thigh or the right sit bone so that you feel more supported by the earth beneath you. But there's no pressure to get anywhere near full splits. We're just finding a variation that works where we feel the stretch through the back hip flexors and the front hamstrings. Okay, just hold another breath in. Exhale fully. And then when you're ready, we're going to make our way back to low lunge. So right knee over your right ankle, and you can just give your hips a little forwards backward motion. Like I said, this one is kind of no joke, so if you need to pause the video and rest, please do so. And then when you're ready, we're going to make our way into deer pose. So kind of similar to how you would get into pigeon. We're going to heel toe the right foot over towards the left wrist and release the right knee down towards the right wrist. So your right shin is parallel with the front of the mat. From here, the difference is that we're going to sit the right sit bone down either to the earth or to a block. And then we're going to bend the left knee so that the left shin is 90 degrees. So the right shin is parallel with the short edge of the mat and the left shin is parallel with the long edge of the mat. Like we're creating this kind of, I don't even know what this shape is, but this kind of little shape. So this left leg is internally rotating and the right leg is externally rotating. From here, just tent your fingers and square those hips off and notice which hip you feel the most sensation in, if any at all. And maybe work with shifting the weight from one side of the pelvis to the other and notice if that affects which hip you feel the motion in. And now we're going to come into, it's one of my favorite poses, but my goodness, it's so intense. So from our seated position, our deer position, we're going to keep the right leg where it is and we're going to bring the left leg over to stack on top of the right. So I'll turn to face you guys. So your left leg, your left ankle is stacked over your right knee and your left knee is working down towards your right ankle. And you may be up here like this and that's completely fine. What we want to avoid happening is this kind of sickling through the foot. We're not looking to come into lotus. Instead, we're looking to firmly plant the ankle over the knee. If you have your blocks, you can place your thighs to blocks to support yourself a little bit more, maybe just one, and eventually those shins stack. And you can keep your fingers tented, or once again, you can begin to walk your hands forwards. And if anyone's still looking for a bit more intensity, you can walk your hands over towards the right side. And yeah, really feeling this in the left glute. Keep flexing both sets of toes back to make sure there's no pain in the knee. And don't forget to breathe. And then when you're ready, walk your hands back to center. Gently walk your hands back up and release those legs very gently. We'll just roll over the shins and make our way back to downward facing dog, where we'll just take a couple of breaths. You're also welcome to do this from a child's pose. And then we get to do all of those stretches on the other side. So as we inhale, lift your left leg up. As you exhale, option to just bend your left knee, bring your left heel towards your right glute. Really feel that opening through the hips. You can bring movement if you'd like. And then as we inhale, extend the left leg back. As you exhale, step the left foot through to the space between the hands. And once again, we're just going to drop that right knee down, come into a low lunge. So first option is to keep the hands to either side of the left foot. Strongly recommend, if you can, that you come up. This helps to move the pressure deeper into the hip flexors. And just let the shoulders soften down. As we did on the other side, you're also welcome to just come to a wall. And you can just come into this as gracefully as you can. So you bring your right knee to the earth, right toes face up towards the ceiling as your shin works up the wall. Bring your left foot forward and you can bring your hands to blocks, or just gently make your way up. And hopefully it won't be long to feel this. Over time you can let those hips sink a little bit lower. Keep squeezing the right glute wherever you are. Don't let your pressure work into the lower back. You really want to feel this in the front of the right thigh. And just keep breathing. I know it's easier said than done with some of these slightly more intense hip openers. And then when you're ready, just releasing the hands down. If you're at the wall, take this very gently. You may want to come down onto your left knee to walk yourself forwards, and then bring yourself back to the low lunge, and we'll make our way into half splits. So from here, we're going to straighten the left leg, bring the pelvis over the right knee. Left toes can be pointed or flexed, or if you have a block, place your block next to your right heel, so you can sit your left sit bone down to the block. From here, you can bring your hands forwards, breathing in, nice tall spine. Maybe breathing out, Bring your chin towards your shin. So we're combining these movements. So we just stretched the hip flexors. Now we're focusing on the stretch in the hamstrings. This covers the complete flexion and extension of the hip joint. And eventually, those combined can lead to a full splits pose, but we're not getting too caught up on that. Doesn't matter if we ever do the splits. Now, if you want to give it a go, you're welcome to come into the modified version with me. If you don't have blocks and you're not super mobile, as in splits doesn't come very naturally to you, then I don't recommend trying this today because we want to make sure that we feel supported. So we're going to come back to our low lunge, bring hands to blocks on either side of the pelvis. So we want to keep our spine nice and tall here, and we can combine the movements of walking the right leg back. Depending on the surface you're on, you may need to kind of adjust here a little bit, or walking the left foot forwards. And stop where we need to. We want to keep the hands nice and supported by the earth. You can adjust the blocks, bring them onto a lower setting. Maybe eventually we can come down with the hands onto the lower setting of the blocks, or you can even place the block underneath the left sit bone so that you feel supported through the hip itself. Keep squeezing that right glute if you can. If possible, engage the left quadricep so you're feeling that result all the way through the hamstring. And you want to keep the pelvis as squared as you possibly can. So avoid the tendency of leaning off to the left. I know it's tricky, just keep breathing. And I'm afraid there's no real graceful way of getting out of splits. So just bring your hands to the blocks. Make sure you just slide your leg back or walk your right knee in. And you can take a little bit of front to back motion here. If you need to, again, pause the video to give your hips a chance to reset. This is a very active stretching class. And then when you're ready, we're going to make our way into deer pose. So bringing the left knee forwards, bring your hands down to the earth. We're going to heel toe the left foot over towards the right wrist, left knee down so your left shin is parallel with the front of the mat. From there, we're going to sit the left sit bone down, so you may lean off to the side here, and you're going to bring your right shin parallel with the long side of the mat. So the joints are stacked, heel in line with left knee, in line with left hip, right knee in line with right hip, which the right knee is in line with the right ankle. So we're creating this kind of crisscross position. Remember, you can always sit your sit bones to a block, square your chest to the front of the mat. And I don't know what the rules are on this, but I always like to do a little bit of side to side motion through the hip and notice how it feels through one hip versus the other. So we're getting that internal rotation of the right hip and the external rotation of the left hip. Just exploring all the motion through the pelvis today. And then when you're ready, we're going to move into that super fun fire log pose. So you're going to bring your right ankle now over your left knee, and you want your shins to stack. So you're creating this little diamond shape in between your thigh and your shin. Remember here, your legs may be way up high, and that's completely fine. But if you want to support yourself with your hands or with blocks underneath the knees so that you feel like you've got a little bit more support, you can also sit on a block. And if you feel comfortable wherever you are, you can exhale, fold forwards, and maybe even walk towards the left so you feel more of an enhanced stretch through that right glute. And try not to let the ankles sickle, keep the toes flexed back. And when you're ready, walk your hands back through center and all the way up. And we're just going to roll over the shins and make our way to downward dog. And we'll just take a couple of breaths here to recenter, to reset. Take an inhale. As we exhale, we're going to drop to the knees and we're going to come into frog pose. Now, if you have any injuries to your knees or to your ankles, you're going to come into wide leg child's pose, just like we did at the beginning of our practice. If your knees and ankles are healthy, Still take this one very gently. So from keeping our wrists under our shoulders, we want to really make sure our arms are supporting our body weight here, so we're not collapsing into the joints. And from here, we're going to start to bring the knees wide. Now you can always turn on the mat, so your mat is underneath your knees for a bit of additional support. And we're going to bring the knees wider than the mat, and you just want to look back. Make sure your ankles are in line with your knees and your toes are flexing back in line with your ankles. So creating this, again, similar to our deer pose, this kind of 90 degrees. Once you feel stable here, maybe you have the opportunity to come down onto the forearms or even release the chest or the forehead down. This can also be done with a bolster underneath your hips or blocks underneath your forearms for a bit of additional support. Now this one, I invite you to try some movement. So bring the pelvis forward, bring the pelvis back, and more than likely there will be this kind of sweet spot where you feel your inner thighs stretching, those adductor muscles. And then I invite you to hold there for a bit longer. Maybe you can even walk your knees a little bit wider. And just making sure you feel stable through the knees. Your toes should be facing out in the same direction as the knees, so you're not twisting into them. Maybe with each exhale, your pelvis sinks a little bit lower. And then when you're ready, we're just going to walk our hands back up, if they haven't already. Again, weight into the arms. This is to help keep the pressure out of the knees as you kind of heel toe those feet back to mat distance apart. And we're just going to sit the hips to the heels and just press back to a child's pose just for a breath or two. And then we're going to walk up and we're going to make our way into a hero's pose. Now this one is the deep stretch for the hip flexors. This is also the deepest internal rotation of the hips we're going to do today. So come forwards, and we're just going to bring the heels slightly wider than the pelvis, but you want the tops of the feet flat to the earth, and you still want your knees to be pretty close together so they're not too wide. Have a block ready if you're not sure about this one. From here, you're going to sit your pelvis back, and the pelvis eventually is going to sit to the space in between the heels. Now, if this feels like intense pressure through the knees, you can place a block under your sit bone, or even better, grab a blanket or a towel and place it in between your thigh and your shin bone. This will take the pressure out of the knees, but you'll still get the great stretch through the hips. If this feels okay and your pelvis can touch the floor, just check your toes are facing back and your thighs should be spiraling in towards each other. This movement shouldn't be happening at the knee joint, it should be happening higher up at the hip. And if this feels good, you're welcome to come down onto your back, so releasing to the earth one forearm at a time with your hands to the feet. And if this feels good, you can release your shoulders down with the option to take opposite hand to opposite elbow above your head. Now, your knees may go a little bit to the side, but eventually you want your knees touching. So you can walk your knees together, and this may feel like a really intense stretch through the fronts of the thighs. Deep, deep internal rotation and extension of the hip. So quite an intense one. If you're not feeling pain through the knees, just ensuring that you're finding that stretch through the fronts of the thighs and not into the lower back. And then when you're ready, if you're on your back, very gently, one hand, one forearm at a time, softly make your way back up. And you can just come back to tabletop, release the knees, give your toes a little tap onto the earth if you feel good. And then we're going to cross at the shins and sit the hips in between the feet. And we're going to come into half Lord of the Fishes for that nice adduction of the hip joint. So we're going to bend the right knee and then bring the right foot to the outside of the left thigh. And then you're welcome to stay here, or you can lean to the left to bring the left heel to the outside of the right sit bone. Use the left elbow to draw that right knee in towards the left armpit. And that's the most important part of this posture today, is to get the stretch on the outside of the hip. When you feel comfortable here, you can bring it into a gentle little twist, either bringing your right hand behind you, or if the bind is accessible, you can reach your left fingers through the thigh and the shin bone to reach your hand behind your back. And try to keep that right sit bone towards the earth. Take another inhale. Exhale fully. And then we're going to unwind, untwist, and we're going to come into cow face legs, sometimes called shoelace. So we're going to stack the right knee now over your left knee, and you want both heels to the outsides of the sit bones. So I'll turn to face you so it's a little bit more clear what's going on. So you want your knees stacked and heels towards the sit bones. And from here you can tent your fingers either in front or behind, or if it feels good, you can walk your hands forward, release your chin or your forehead down towards your right knee. And again, this may feel quite intense through the outside of the hip. And then very gently walk your hands back up. And we're going to do that on the other side. So gently unwind, release. So you can just lean off to the side to extend that bottom leg out in front, bring your right knee in and extend the right leg long. And then we'll switch. So now we're going to draw the left knee in, place the sole of the left foot to the outside of the right thigh, and this right leg can stay extended, or you can lean to the right to bring the right heel to the outside of the left sit bone. Use the crook of the right elbow to hug this left knee in towards your right armpit. And you want to keep that left sit bone rooted, so you really enhance the stretch through the IT band, all the way through to the glute muscles in the upper part of the hip. And only if it feels accessible, you're welcome to bind by threading your right fingers between your thigh and your shin and reaching back for the left hand. Try to keep your spine nice and tall and your pelvis nice and balanced. Take another inhale. Exhale fully. And then inhale, we unwind, turn to center, and we're going to make our way into that shoelace pose or cow face pose. So I'll turn and face you. So you can keep the legs as they are, or you can walk that left heel towards the outside of the left sit bone, so your knees eventually stack on top of each other. Fingers can be pointed behind you, in front of you, or you can begin to walk yourself forward, bringing your chin down towards your left knee. And then when you're ready, walking your hands back up. Gently unwind from the legs. And we're going to come down to lay on our backs. And from here, just hug your knees into the chest. It might feel nice to rock from side to side, or even to bring the feet to mat distance apart and just gently windscreen wiper the legs from side to side. Just really ensuring that the full release has been through the hips and no pressure has managed to migrate its way through to the knees or the lower back. Really important that we listen to the body. And when you're ready, after either having your knees in or bending your knees, you can just release them long into Shavasana. Bring your heels wide, bring your arms alongside the body with the palms of the hands facing up, and just let go of any control you had on your breathing. And just notice if there's anywhere within your body where you're feeling sensation, tingling. You have done some powerful, powerful active stretching through the hips today, moving with some real intention. So it's going to be quite normal to feel a little bit of fatigue perhaps in these areas. Also, you may notice a little bit of soreness, maybe tomorrow or the next day. So treat yourself with some nice nourishing energy today. And just know that there is no overnight fix for mobility, for flexibility. These postures, some of them are still inaccessible for myself. I've been practicing for years. And so it's so important not to judge ourselves based on whether or not we can quote unquote do the pose, but instead to learn to feel into the body and to really notice any progression we feel on a day-to-day, any differences, and to modify the practice to suit our body instead of modifying our body to suit the practice. So I invite you to stay resting here in stillness for another few minutes. If you have the time, traditionally at least 7 minutes for Shavasana. I just want to thank you all so much for joining me. Please leave any comments, feedback, anything you'd like to see in the comments. Otherwise, I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of your day. Today, as you go forward, I wish you peace in your thoughts, peace in your words, and peace in your heart. Namaste.